I am, as Mark says, delighted to introduce David Willetts. David, as I'm sure you know, is the Minister for Universities and Science. And I also know that he takes a very close personal interest in these kinds of issues. So with no more ado, can I welcome you, David, to the meeting, to the showcase, and to the headquarters of the TUC. So David, here you are.
It's great to be back at the headquarters of the TUC. I was here only the other week talking to members of the TUC, particularly, I have to say, talking to the unions who represent people working in research establishments and in R&D. We had a very useful conversation. So I'm a regular visitor, and it is good to be back. But I was very keen to come along here today to join this session. I think that the Connected Communities Showcase is a really exciting and worthwhile project, and just catching the last part of the previous discussion was brought to life exactly what a significant and valuable program this is. And there are lots of connections that this program is about, and I wanted very briefly in my remarks to touch on several examples of those connections. And certainly it is very important that one form of connection is the interdisciplinary nature of this research. And it's great that we have different research councils working together, different types of expertise represented in this room today. But I wanted to take this opportunity because I suspect that the bulk of the people here probably are from the humanities, and this program is led by the AHRC. Just to say that I regard this program as a showcase, not just for connected communities, but a showcase of the importance of what the humanities and social sciences contribute to research activity in Britain. And I never now try to miss an opportunity of saying how much I love the humanities and how important they are. Thank you very much. Yeah. And it is why. And I detect, the trouble is, the danger is you take an opportunity of a speech like this to remark on whatever is the latest article in the Times Higher Education that's wound me up that week. But I'd just like to state yet again that whenever financial decisions come across our desks in BIS, and there is far more to research and its significance than finance, but finance is one of the ways where you can judge what a government's priorities are, and you can judge our value on things. Whenever there is a decision coming across my desk on finance, we always aim to make sure that the humanities, and of course the social sciences, but the humanities have a fair crack of the whip. That's why within the so-called science ring fence, there is of course the spending of all the different research councils, and within those research councils we have tried to maintain AHRC spending alongside the spending of the other research councils. And in fact, for the first time, the ring fence includes the QR funding from HEFCE, which does particularly tend to support research in the humanities, very understandably. And even in other areas like teaching funding, it's clear that, if anything, that's an area where funding for teaching in the humanities has probably increased after our higher education reforms, however controversial they may be. So I just wanted to assure you that I know there is sometimes this sense of, dare I say it, threat from people in the humanities. I would like to see the humanities as a bold, significant, world-class, confident participant in the research activities that go on in Britain, and that is what I think this showcase is really all about, and why I wanted to be here today. Now, the connections that you've been talking about come in several forms. As I said, there is the connectedness of different academic and research disciplines. There is the connectedness, which you've just been hearing about, between the research community and the wider world. And that is also incredibly important. And sometimes there is this picture, completely unfair, that the arts and humanities are less connected or have less impact than other disciplines. The evidence is to the contrary. If anything, it looks as if there are a higher proportion of academics in the arts and humanities interacting with communities, and be it both the local community, the third sector, public services, private sector, than in other disciplines. So connectedness is not a threat or challenge to the inherent worth of activity in the arts and humanities. And another form of connectedness, which is also relevant to the discussion today, is connections to the policy-making community as well. And there, I very much hope that in the world of public policy, we will be able to learn from some of the insights emerging from this agenda. Everything from initiatives on design within communities, the importance of understanding local history if you're going to work with communities and think about their future, the importance of designing against crime. So there is the connection to the wider public policy community. But the most important connection, and the last one on my list, and the one where really the people from the arts and humanities have brought, I think, a distinctive and imaginative take to this whole subject, is the connectedness with the communities themselves. And in its more radical form, sometimes turning the whole model of research upside down and empowering communities to shape and drive the research so that projects have become community-led. And I think that with 100 research projects and 400 partner organizations, the new initiatives and projects being launched here today, we can see that that is also generating a radical and bold approach to research. So I wanted to come and celebrate this showcase, celebrate the different forms of connection that it is all about, and look forward to celebrating further successes and insights from all of our research community, including within it humanities research in the future. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, David, for making time to come along and share this with us in a very hectic and busy schedule. We actually have a few more minutes now, and David said he'd be happy to take any questions from the floor. So, over to you.
I'm interested in you talking about the connection with policy and those who are making policy. What do you think is the best way for us to make sure that our learning feeds through to the policymakers?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that I have been in meetings of, say, the Home Affairs. I'm trying to think of practical examples. The Home Affairs Cabinet Committee, where some of the work that had been done, part of previous foresight exercises on mental capital and well-being, were being drawn on as we discussed policy towards older people, for example. And I think of that example because there's some of the work that's being done as part of this showcase seems to me to be directly relevant to that. A good way in to departmental thinking with empirical finding and research is through the heads of the chief scientists in each department. We now have a distinctive recognition of social science and its allied professions in Whitehall. But that working with the network of scientists headed up by the chief scientist, who again has all the different research disciplines as part of his responsibility, I think that would be a very good way in, and that in turn means that empirical findings and observations in turn will reach ministers. So that, I think, is probably a good place, as good a place to start as any.
Amelia Lee from LGBT Youth Northwest. Given that 9 out of 10 of the Russell Group universities have closed their youth and community studies departments because of the pressure around finances, I was wondering how you think or how you imagine that the real and consistent development between communities and the universities will grow and prosper?
Well, I'm not aware of that particular decision that you take. That's for individual universities. The one thing I can say is we're absolutely committed in government to ensuring universities are well financed. And although probably now we could have a debate about the controversy on our higher education reforms, one of the reasons why we did it is I wanted to see more cash going into our universities, and that's why for teaching funding, which I think has suffered historically, hasn't had all the prestige and attention that research funding has had, the teaching reforms, on our estimates, shared with HEFGE, increase the cash going into universities to pay for teaching from about 8 billion at the beginning of the Parliament to over 9 billion by 14-15. So that, together with the cash protection for research spending, means that our universities, even in an age of austerity, should be well financed. I did not want to see our universities weakened in tough times. Now, for individual universities, we'll then have decisions to take about their priorities and how they allocate their funding, but we have discharged our responsibility of ensuring that they are properly funded, even when there are such intense public spending pressures.
Thank you. Kim Nott from Lancaster University. I wonder if you could speak to the issue of the relationship between research and democracy. Do you think that engaged research of this kind that aims to work from the bottom up, if you like, or at least take that seriously, can change our political life, change the way people are empowered within society, and change the future of democratic politics in the UK?
I think that it can. I think it can by enriching civil society. And in turn, the activities of civil society have both directly, they both directly serve the community and have a benefit, but they also have a great influence on the democratic representatives, like parliamentarians, and the other public bodies that they come across. So getting a voice, getting argued for, being understood, having evidence to explain the significance of what happens in the local community is incredibly empowering. You tempt me into just one wider point, though, of course, which is and we're not going to, one of the things I notice is how most weeks I am invited to endorse the Haldane principle for research, which I do. And it is striking how, of course, quite rightly, we raise money from taxpayers to pay for research, and within the ring fence of £4.6 billion, including the AHRC and everything, it's an absolutely crucial demand of the research community, which I endorsed early on in my time as minister, that democratically elected politicians should have nothing to do with decisions about how this money should be spent. It should be spent by the academic community in accordance with its principles of peer review. When it comes to the big decisions on capital, we do have a role, but I would just gently tease the research community by saying I think one of its main demands for the effectiveness and support for research is that there shouldn't be a role for democratically elected politicians in deciding the projects that are funded. And that has been the basis for the research community in Britain for a long time. And as I say, I've endorsed it, and it's called the Haldane Principle.
If no one else is willing. Ian Hargreaves from Cardiff University. I think I've heard you use the word society this morning, and I think I've heard you use the adjective big, but not two words in the same sentence. This particular set of programs, Connected Communities, that phrase was often used in the discussion around the program in its earlier days, less so now. I wonder how relevant you think that term still is to the work that we are doing and that you are doing.
Yeah, and I remember the fuss about this. When was it? Was it late 2010, early 2010? I remember the fuss around it. And I'll make a couple of comments about that. First of all, this programme, of course, predates, and I've already referred to the Haldane Principle, predates the arrival of the coalition in government and is something that is emerged from the research councils themselves. And the implication in some of the media comment that this was a kind of instruction from ministers was plain wrong. Secondly, the kind of wider issue of social capital, cooperation, what makes a community. The issue of social capital is not solely the preserve of the academic community. In many ways, when in my party we talk about big society, when in the Labour Party now they claim, slightly oddly for me as a Conservative, they talk about one nation. When we hear the language of community being fought over by political parties, this is telling us something quite important, that one of the needs in one of the lively subjects of political debate is how you sustain some sense of community and the role of non-market values in a market economy. So the fact that there was a research programme developed by the research community and also a political party that in using the big society was just trying to tap in to a debate about neighbourliness and social capital, I think was all basically rather a good thing, which we should welcome. It tells us that the academic community had independently hit on a research challenge, which is also topical in the political debate. And where that fuss went wrong, and where I thought, if I may say so, it was unfair, not least on the people with great integrity running the AHRC, was to take what seemed to me to be a happy combination of a topic being live in the political agenda and a topic being researched by researchers, and trying to create, completely unfairly, some kind of sense of scandal around that. I would hope that the research community in the future, in lots of different ways, will be researching topics that do feed into the political debate. And as we are all ultimately participants in the same national conversation, and in politicians we try to engage with it, and researchers are often also excited and stimulated by it, there should absolutely be overlap between what researchers want to look into and what politicians want to argue about and indeed attach slogans to. And that seems to me to be entirely healthy. But as I say, that doesn't mean that any researcher should ever be expected to do something because of an instruction from a politician.
Okay, David, can I thank you most heartily for coming along, for your speech and for responding so openly to the questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thanks.